You don't have to look very far to find a touching story about why someone became a teacher. Mine isn't one of those stories. What my story has in common with some of those more charming ones is that it starts with having experienced really great teaching from a young age. Some of my greatest teachers were the ones who saw teaching as connected to broader movements in society. I liked watching those teachers operate, knowing that everything that was happening in my classroom was connected to things far beyond what we could see. Like many others, my goals for myself started to become clear when I was a college student. After a privileged upbringing, I had started to see the injustices around me, and I wanted to become an activist. One day I was on the phone with my mom, and I told her that I was considering chaining myself to a fake oil barrel and getting arrested the next day. She used some simple words to talk me out of it. My mom told me that in her career as an elementary school teacher, she saw herself as an activist every day. This conversation started an ongoing one between my mother and me about what it could mean for public schools to be involved in social justice efforts. Maybe somebody listening is wondering why I would even be saying that there could be a relationship between public schools and efforts toward social justice. For a large number of people, school works just fine. And aren't we already providing equal opportunities? I'll start with just a few reasons why school actually isn't working just fine for everybody. Here are 3 quick and simple reasons why we need activism in public schooling. Schools today are more segregated than they were during the civil rights movement. We know that African American boys are disproportionately disciplined in our schools, and the NAACP has projected that 1 in 3 black men born today can expect to spend time in prison during his lifetime. Sociologists and educational researchers tell us again and again that income is the greatest predictor of standardized test scores. US society is far, far from social justice. If public schools stay out of conversations about social justice, we don't stand a chance to make the needed changes in society. Can public education bring us closer to social justice? I've been wrestling with this question for years. I decided to become an elementary school teacher myself because I really believed that the answer was yes. My mom's vision of teaching as social activism was my driving force. But it didn't take me long to start to see that first, the world of schools was changing in ways that made social justice even more elusive. And second, that the design of the system itself was a root cause of that persistent inequity. But public schools are such an amazing idea. They're a fundamental pillar of democracy. Through a public school system, we build an educated populace, and we aim to provide opportunities for every child to find her brilliance. In a deeply segregated society, school can be the only place where a child interacts with children of a different race than his own. And we know that to solve social problems, we need social interaction with each other. If we're to have any hope for addressing injustices in schools, we have to be able to hold 2 contradictory ideas in our heads at the same time. We have to recognize that the school system can have both immense problems and incredible promise. That the very idea of public education can be both deeply flawed and still worth fighting for. This can be an uncomfortable tension. Teacher and educational researcher Jeff Duncan Andrade says that this requires a critical hope, which I take to mean being willing to live with that tension and to know that you're working towards something better. Within my critical hope lies a belief that's sometimes shaky, that the promise of a true democracy can be realized through the creation of a socially just public school system. So in spite of these tensions, I wasn't ready to give up on the institution of schools or on the promise of democracy altogether. So I kept studying education, and I stayed involved in schools. My dissertation research took me into a deeper version of a similar question. Can public education bring us closer to social justice? One of the themes in my findings focused on the word achievement. As you probably know, ever since the 2002 law known as No Child Left Behind, U.S. students have been subjected to an increasing number of standardized tests at school. When children in a school don't do well on standardized tests, the consequences can be devastating, not just to those students, but also to their teachers, to their schools, and their communities. This narrow definition of achievement has also been linked to the decrease in sociodramatic play, the arts, and recess, and to the squelching of natural curiosity and creativity in people of all ages. While these activities are essential for a healthy body and mind, we've seen them replaced by intensive, test-driven instruction, particularly in low-income communities and communities of color. My dissertation research explained the faulty logic in this conception of achievement. The logic tends to work like this. First, achievement, defined as standardized test scores, is seen as a good way to show if we are or are not reaching the hearts and minds of students, particularly those poor students and students of color who tend to be our focus in conversations about achievement. Then, if those students can do better on standardized measures, then they and the system supporting them have succeeded. My research demands that we take a closer look at these questions and see what has been lost in the process. For example, whose knowledge, experiences, and cultural selves have been valued and whose haven't? Who has changed and how in order to reach this new level of achievement? For that matter, who defines the terms of achievement? And what is the price of achievement for marginalized students and for their families? What does learning look like? And what does not learning look like under this definition of achievement? Taking a closer look at these questions makes it pretty clear that there's more to achievement than meets the eye. In other words, the words that we use to talk about schools can be dangerously oversimplified. And words matter, because the language that we use to talk about a topic shapes our thoughts about it, and our thoughts shape our actions. As I prepared this talk, I wanted to make a bold proposal for a new form of activism that would get us all closer to being able to answer that yes, public education can, should, and will bring us closer to social justice in education. Earlier this week, I posted a question on Facebook, and then I started talking to pretty much everybody I saw. I asked them this: what does achievement in school mean to you? What should it mean? Listen to some of the stories that I heard. One of my son's teachers said this, and I quote, "My first year teaching was in an early elementary setting for kids with emotional behavioral disorders. I had big plans. Oh, all the learning we were going to do. By the second day, I realized we had very different things to learn. I had a kindergarten student who every day would get off the bus. We would say, 'Good morning,' and he would say, 'Shut up, mother effer.' By the end of the year, we would say, 'Good morning,' and he would say, 'Shut up.' This was big. He didn't learn to read any new sight words that year, but he unlearned many others." The next two come from parents of children who are in schools on different sides of this country. Quote, "I would like his achievement to be something that he self-recognizes, rather than something that someone else has deemed valuable. I want this to unfold in an environment free from shame, blame, and threat, so that he can attempt, practice, fail, and succeed in a place that values the whole learning process." And the next one. "I want my children to grow up and be good people, well-rounded, engaged, compassionate, and independent regardless of their academic achievements." And finally, a teacher in North Minneapolis shared that she sees her school as achieving and that their test scores rose 20% this year, which is huge, but still lower than the official expectations of the school district. So are they achieving or not? These four responses are representative of what I heard from a lot of people. I heard people describe achievement as process-oriented, not product-oriented, as contextual, as unpredictable, and as defined by each individual for him or herself. These responses also show just a snapshot of how our words represent complex maps of ideas, of people and places and opinions that can't be fully captured in a word as deceptively simple as achievement. Remember, when we use the same word enough times to signify the same thing, it can come to be seen as true in and of itself. But words are windows into cultures, and each shifts along with the other. My conversations with people about achievement showed me that the problem is not that the popular version of the word has shaped popular thinking to the point that nobody's questioning the effects of that narrow definition. What I saw instead is that there are many people who are saying and thinking the right things, but we aren't being heard in the right places. So how could it be that our culture and our word are at such a mismatch? It's time for teachers and other advocates for public education to reclaim the word achievement. I've already talked about how language shapes our thinking, and I've given some examples of some of the things that we already know about what it can really mean to achieve. So let's talk for the last few minutes about some ways we might use new forms of activism to reclaim the word achievement. Part of the difficulty with taking back the word is that just like achievement itself, activism has to be personal. If we were to build a movement based on my talk today, it wouldn't work if it was only based on how I see it or on how one of you sees it. Think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The leaders of social justice movements tend to get held up like singular characters. But if you look closely enough, you see that they were simply part of something so much bigger. Ultimately, they're just people who had great passion around a worthy idea and who were surrounded by a crowd of other people, other ordinary people, who shared that same a passion about that same extraordinary thing. So I've fallen into this myself, initially thinking that I could come up here today and tell you all that one thing we all need to do to reclaim the word achievement and to initiate the great move towards social justice in education. But no. Social movements grow from lots of small and great ideas, communicating, getting organized, and coalescing into something greater. So what can we do? We can keep talking. We can communicate with one another as these conversations change our thinking about what might come next in taking back achievement in public education. Like I did with that Facebook post, social media can connect us to other people who are thinking about similar things. And they can link us in ways that inspire real-life relationships, that inspire new ways of thinking, that change the way we talk, and change the way we act in our quest for social justice in education. Twitter is a powerful medium because it connects across all social categories. It's wildly popular, and it changes ideas. So you can use this hashtag, #AchievementIs, to tell your own stories about achievement. But Twitter activism only works if it's one mode of communication in a multimedia and a broad social movement, a broad movement. We're talking about complex and systems level problems, and so we know that the solutions can't be simple either. Using social media can help us to connect with existing groups that are already working and using activism to get closer to justice in education. None of this is to diminish the everyday conversations we have in our real lives, though. Remember how important our words are. As teachers, we have lots of ideas about what it can really mean to achieve. But when we get into the classroom, external pressures can make us feel like we have to leave those ideas at the door. So taking back the word in our everyday lives could be as simple as talking to a group of third graders about achievement and asking them to define it for themselves. My 9-year-old nephew said that to him, achievement means getting stuff done and being happy about it. So we have to know what achievement means to a person before we can know how processes of teaching and learning might help him to get there. If you wondered, I ended up serving on the press team instead of chaining myself to that oil barrel back in college. I didn't get arrested. Instead, I found my own road to activism through my teaching and through the words that I can share in multiple venues like this one today. So as far as my initial question goes, can public education bring us closer to social justice? I still don't know. I'll have to wrestle with that question for a while longer. But I bet I know some people, including some great teachers, who can talk me into it. Thank you.